The powerhouses in the city all had their own reactions as Gondo and Luo Yinglong began their battle. It was a sort of resonance between lights of the soul that let those far away sense something. Borrowing the force of the heavens and earth. 8 trigrams form. Thunder. Bolt. Luo Yinglong's hands gave a wave. The 8 trigrams formation spun faster and several streaks of lightning that flashed past were pulled in, disappearing from the skies. What immediately spurted out was the lightning gathering below the formation. It was like a laser cannon that had been charging had spat out a serpent of light. Several seconds later, a pillar of lightning shot out from that formation. The speed was incredibly fast. All those present could only feel the world lighting up, and before they recovered, that laser-like lightning descended, enveloping the Unit 01 within. Thunder Dragon rumbles. Luo Yinglong couldn't help but start to breath heavily after executing this move. He stared at the giant pit formed by the lightning strike, afraid that undying machine would appear again within. He had used borrowing the force of heaven and earth 2 times since the start of his battle against Gondo. Although they had all been complemented by this rainstorm, and were much stronger than usual, it was still unable to break through that Evis light of the soul for some reason. With no alternative, he could only use lightning, the greatest force he could borrow from the natural world at this moment. The might of this move was enormous, and the consumption of refined chi was great as well. With his current strength in the astral stage, he could only use this level of power several times. If he still couldn't kill them, he could only use some forbidden technique that would completely put his life on the line. The might of this move was abnormally great. That lightning moved at the speed of light. The limits of a life form's speed couldn't dodge it. Gondo had been struck by the lightning pillar before he could even respond, the power within that strike already exceeding the power as the center of an atomic explosion, reaching the level of hydrogen bombs. This was a move Luo Yinglong had infused the power of the world into after all. If Luo Yinglong relied on himself alone to execute this move, he would have to be in the unification or even the tribulation traversing stages to do it. Of course, if he had a good magical or cultivation treasure and could unleash it to the fullest, he could also use this move in his current stage. It was just that such items were rare, and had a large consumption of refined chi. For instance, there was Xian's Bell of the East Emperor. After that pillar of lightning crashed down, for Gondo and the Eva, which both had been knocked underground, their life or death was unknown. Everyone looked at the ground anxiously. After all, they didn't know whether the Eva's light of the soul could block an attack of the power. If it really could block it, Gondo's power didn't bode well for them. Here, apart from Luo Yinglong risking his life to activate a forbidden technique, perhaps only Zheng could deal with such a powerful Gondo. Not long after, a giant ball of hazy light slowly floated up from deep below. The light was an AT field visible to the eyes, with an Eva within that had half of its body blown off. Even Gondo, which was in its hand, was grievously injured. His stomach and chest was blown off, and the upper and lower halves of his body were only tenuously connected through his backbone. He looked more or less dead, but his face was merely pale and his eyes and face were still moving. It seemed it wasn't a fatal injury. It was at this moment everyone realized his legs were connected with the Unit 01, his legs fusing into it. Before, his pants had been covering it so it hadn't been obvious. Now, they realized it as soon as they took a look. Good, you're strong. If you were too weak, I wouldn't be able to enjoy myself to the fullest. Gondo smiled coldly as he said it word by word. Now this feels like a final battle. All that war of wits and overt schemes Xian talks about is really not interesting. Only a honest battle and life or death feels refreshing. Cultivation, was it? I don't know what kind of gratitude or grievances exist between Zhenzha and you, but you're not the target of my revenge. Stay far away from Team China if you want to live longer. This giant machine is called the Unit 01. The introduction says it's the body of a god and that its sole deficiency is the lack of enough of a soul to move and control it. Thus, I could only exchange the apostle enhancement. I don't know whether I can still be considered human, but I no longer care about anything anymore for the sake of revenge. You'll know about its power soon. It'll be worth it whether I lose my mind or fail to overcome the heart's devil and become a devil, ha ha ha. It'll let you all live a little longer. If you want to die, come kill me now. Gondo had already slowly fused into the Eva's hand as he spoke. When he could no longer be seen, the entire Eva trembled. That damaged body actually began to madly regenerate. Although the damage it had taken was great, based on this speed of continuous propagation, it should be able to completely restore itself within a few hours at most. This did seem to be the best chance to kill him. Why? Luo Yinglong was stunned, asking curiously. We'll discuss the details later. It looks like the Unit 01 needs some time to restore itself to its original state. Let's talk as we fly. That lightning has already disappeared, so this will be a good time to hurry to the Umbrella Corporation building. Let's go. Zheng gave the giant life form a complicated look, before flying into the distance on the sky stick. Luo Yinglong hesitated for a moment, before following behind them on his flying sword. It was only that the squad was missing Yingkong. The basic situation is like that. Ignore what I just said. Let's continue the topic from before. That Unit 01 is obviously the prototype god we met before, just that it's slightly weaker. The situation is slightly strange. The prototype god didn't have a pilot, so I destroyed its central control system. The prototype god began to propagate infinitely, becoming a terrifying monster. I'm not clear on the situation for this Unit 01. If we attack it now, I don't know if it'll go berserk and become such a monster as well, or go berserk in an even worse way now that it has a pilot. We don't know all this. Zheng said to Luo Yinglong as he flew. Luo Yinglong immediately asked in surprise, then, all the more we should completely destroy it when it's defenseless. The problem is that we can't confirm if this is Clone Xian's scheme. When he said this, Zheng specially gave Xian a look. The man was currently silently following behind the group. Those familiar with him would know that this man was using his mind to mull over something. Perhaps it was to deal with enemies or perhaps his own people. Anyways, this fellow made others afraid. Xian suddenly opened his mouth. We don't need to have a direct confrontation with Luo Gondo now. Luo Yinglong, your appearance should be one of the misfortunes of Team Devil. Gondo could have depleted our strength or even threatened us. If possible, it's naturally not necessary to recklessly fight with him at this time. We just need to go with the flow and turn the entire situation into chaos. There's no need to mix ourselves into this chaotic situation. If I didn't guess wrongly, Team Devil and Team Celestial must have started to make their moves. If Team Devil's luck continues to worsen, we don't need to determine a victor between Gondo and us. Hell be beaten by some accident now, the crux is you, Luo Yinglong. Me. Luo Yinglong pointed at himself, mystified. He then laughed, all right. No need to act mysterious. I've been with Adam so long and I know your kind likes to keep things inside. Just say it directly. Why am I the crux? What you want to say should have to do with Team Celestial. No, it should be to do with Adam, right? The remaining 30% probability is you're a spy sent by Adam. But even a spy has to have something to prove their loyalty. The crux is what excuse you'll have to deal with us. The crux lies in you. What did Team Celestial do? Why does my clone want to ally with me to deal with you? Another important question is why does my clone want to act like spectator at the side waiting for benefits while Team Celestial acts against us? Xian pointed at Luo Yinglong, what happened in Team Celestial? Why must us of Team China have no choice but to battle them, and why would Adam definitely trouble us and make the three-way situation lose its balance? My clone scheme as well, the crux of all this lies in what you have to say. The rainstorm remained. However, the lightning was gone, which meant that God's air restrictions were gone. Not discussing whether the removal of the restrictions were man-made or natural, it anyways meant that the various teams' individual flying equipment was now usable. In other words, the greatest obstruction to the team's speed was gone and the distances within the city was no longer a large issue and the road to the Umbrella Corporation building was now open for the teams. Let's go. Well, go this very night? Although I don't know what happened, this is the best chance to go to the Umbrella Corporation building now that the lightning is gone. In the basement Team Africa was in, Neos was frowning as he spoke to his team. A difficult to describe fluctuation had just burst out through the city not long before. It was a fluctuation that was sensed deep within the soul. If using terms that high-level teams could understand to explain, it was that a powerful light of the soul had appeared in the distance. What this meant didn't need to be said. Some teams were already battling, and the combatants were all very powerful based on the intensity and vibrations of the light of the soul. That strength wouldn't exist in the vast majority of teams. The largest probability was that those battling were those from the three strongest teams. I know everyone doesn't understand my request to move in the middle of the night, and ignore everything to enter the city and find Team China. You all don't understand. But we no longer have a path of retreat. If we can't stop Adam, while those Hove unlock the fourth stage and overcome the Heart's Devil and slightly resist, we'll definitely die. As soon as his plan completes, we're dead. The rune technology the White Race's saints, magicians and alchemists collaborated to construct, the Tree of Life, is an unconventional sort of pinnacle. A nigh infinite energy as well, a spear that pierces through the soul and energy, and also, to turn oneself into a body that depends on possessing light of the soul. If you don't want to become his food, you're going to have to start risking your lives. Neos gave a cold look towards the newer veterans in the team. They weren't completely trusting of him the way Richard and the rest were, but everyone's power was important in the final battle. Putting it unpleasantly, if there weren't even disposable pawns for the schemes and calculations, there were no need for a scheme. It was a guarantee that no pawns equaled to no schemes. So, these members needed to exist no matter how unwilling he was. Even if it was just for the coming sacrifices, he had to endure these people. Let's go. Well, fine Team China no matter the cost. How pathetic. My whole life I've been calculating this and that. I didn't think he'll end up making all these rash actions instead in this final battle. Neos laughed bitterly again, standing up as he patted off the dust on his body. He ignored the responses of everyone else, walking alone to the exit of the basement. That fig looked indescribably bleak from behind. For a person who had relied on his wits his entire life, not being able to use it at this juncture that decided life and death was undoubtedly the greatest mockery to him. Apart from Team Africa that departed that very night, a majority of team that had entered the city made the same decision. After all, most teams were mature teams that had underwent multiple life and death tests. Although they weren't the peers of the three strongest teams, they still had their veterans that were slightly stronger. They could sense the light of the soul somewhat, so they had made some guesses. These people even more urgently wanted to reach the Umbrella Corporation building. If the clue wasn't there, they would have to go the main battlefield of the first Resident Evil, the Hive, to find the clue. This was the sole hope for the weaker teams. Disregarding what terrifying monsters may be in the 7th Underground Laboratory, many teams still had this thinking. 100 days were neither a lot nor a little after all. If they snuck into the laboratory while the three strongest teams were going against each other, and if their luck was good and they didn't die, what followed would be fleeing into the vast world. It wasn't necessarily impossible to last the 100 days. Overall, finding the clue was the only path of survival for them. Our team Celestial doesn't need to look for the clue so urgently. Adam looked silently at the gloomy night sky of the distant city. He muttered to the over 10 people behind him. Our power is great. Although the people who are weaker number over 70% of us, there are still 20 of so left. Our strength isn't inferior to Team Devil, let alone Team China. So, we don't need to waste energy searching for whatever clue. Whoever finds it, we just have to snatch it from them. Adam turned his head and continued to speak, and the dozens of people behind him all cheered. A majority of them all revealed expressions of delight, secretly thinking that they had indeed found an excellent backer. If Luo Yinglong had been present, he would surely sneer at Adam's words. They were obviously to trick people, purely to deceive these idiots. They wanted to compare with Team Devil? Just one clone Zheng, no, one clone Gondo was enough to make so many suffer. Against someone who had reached the 4th stage, and against most of these who hadn't reached that level, it was something that numbers could make up for. However, they all didn't know the truth. The reason they could live to this day was because they hadn't met Team China or Team Devil. They hadn't been killed when they met Team Celestial, and instead joined Adam's Angel Alliance plan. Thus, they didn't have much of a notion regarding the power of those in the 4th stage. Of course, there were some exceptions. I don't know about Team Devil, but Team China is strong. Their leader is already powerful to an inconceivable level. I don't have confidence in lasting a minute against him. Honestly, I may not even last one round if he unleashes his full power. I don't think our Angel Alliance is that strong. A young man carrying a Japanese katana was standing within the crowd. The young man was Miyatakariki, who had unfortunately ran into Team China in the perfect storm. He seemed to have fully recovered currently, but the self-confidence that had been present in his eyes before had diminished greatly. He had been defeated in his transformed state by Zheng within a few light punches, and the mental blow from this was great. It was difficult to guarantee his self-confidence after knowing how vast the difference was between him and the other side. Adam Silent gave Miyatakariki a look. He nodded, saying, "True, the high-end members of Team Devil and Team China are indeed stronger than the norm. However, did you fight with most of their members?" Miyatakariki froze for a moment, muttering, "No. That's how it is. Just like all teams, Team China and Team Devil has both the weak and the strong with. Even if their powerhouses come, us Team Celestial aren't eggs that'll shatter on the slightest impact. Our powerhouses can naturally stop them. So, our Angel Alliance is actually the strongest in the realm." Adam smiled gently to everyone. Miyatakariki didn't say anything more. Although he still had some doubts in his heart, he still had some belief in Adam's words. In truth, anybody familiar with the 3 teams could refute this lie. Those who joined Team Devil were all talents with the greatest latent potential in the realm. Team Devil also pursued a policy of the law of the jungle. Anyone who could survive till now would be a high-level combatant. Team China's circumstances were more unique. With Zheng and his power, along with Xian and his intelligence shielding them along the way, and their life and death battles, the survivors were all super veterans who had survived many movies. Although they couldn't match up to the members of Team Devil, each and every member of Team China's power couldn't be overlooked. This also applied to Team Celestial. As every person who joined were team leaders, their strength was top class. Adam's words could only trick these ordinary teams who weren't clear about the truth. After all, the teams they had met were all those with only 2 or strong members as well as mostly ordinary members. If it really was as Adam said, where Team Devil and Team China had only a few powerhouses, the Angel Alliance that had gathered quite a few teams would truly be strongest. Since everyone agrees with my suggestion, well, wait here. Adam turned his head again, his eyes twinkling constantly, then he muttered, "Wait for the final moment to arrive." So it's not that I don't want to say. It's that I can't. Luo Yinglong looked at everyone with a gloomy expression. He had been trying to find a way to describe the secret in his heart ever since he found Team China. Alas, his intelligence just wasn't enough, and he just couldn't find a way to say it out. So, in the end he could only just start scolding. "Anyways, just come with me to kill Adam. Everything will be fine and dandy as long as we kill that guy. Otherwise, well, all die together." Luo Yinglong shouted to the rest. Unfortunately, everyone, including Xian, didn't take him seriously. Ignoring what Xian was thinking, the problem was that Zheng simply didn't plan to deal with Team Celestial personally. His entire mind was filled with his clone, the clone Zheng that was dubbed the apex of the realm. "Damn it, why can't you take action?" Song Tian met Xiang Yu in one of the movies. That weirdo was also terrifyingly strong. Both used the same weapon, and the 2 of them actually changed from enemies to friends after a battle. Song Tian gained the 7 strikes of purple lightning. Supposedly there's 8th and 9th strike as well, but I've never seen him use it. Even so, he's ridiculous enough already. I may be able to beat him if I use my evil god's formation, but I won't have any power remaining to beat Adam then. That fellow has been hiding himself and hasn't revealed anything, but I know he's in the 4th stage with Light of the Soul. I don't know whether he's conquered the Heart's Devil, but his strength can't be underestimated. That fellow once before in White Cough, he knocked out a adamantine magic doll there. What? Zheng turned around to Luo Yinglong who was flying behind him. He asked curiously, "White what? Is it a movie world?" "Oh. It should be counted as a movie. Anyways, Adam has always been holding back. He's definitely not any weaker than Song Tian or me. Luo Yinglong seemed to be fearful of something, as he rubbed his body and head, only replying after a long while. Hearing this, Zhen nodded. He also looked at Xian. Didn't the strategist of Team China have hidden depths himself? He had revealed the slightest bit in a nightmare on Elm Street, and the growth in strength after had been ridiculous. Together with that bell of the East Emperor that may or may not be usable, other cultivation treasures and inventions of his, he even suspected this fellow may be able to challenge him. With this as a basis, Adam's strength couldn't be lower than the 4th stage no matter how weak it was. Yeah. So, go with me to kill Adam. When he saw Zhen nod his head, he immediately egged him on with great pleasure. No go. I need to conserve my strength to face my clone. Zhen bluntly rejected him. Damn it, what exactly do you want me to say? If we don't kill Adam, we may all die. Luo Yinglong shouted. There's no need for you to say anything else other than the truth. Everyone said unanimously aside from Xian. Fuck. Luo Yinglong was speechless, and thumped his head in vexation. Looking at him, it seemed he was taking it really hard. At this moment, Xian, who had been silent, suddenly opened his mouth. I'm about to ask some questions. If you encounter anything you can't tell me, just tell me. If you can't even say the words can't say, then just keep your silence. Were you restricted by Adam? That's why you can't tell the truth? No. It's unrelated to Adam. Luo Yinglong immediately said. Good, then on to the next question. Team Celestial found a legacy of either the ancient saints or cultivators in a movie world, right? Xian nodded as he continued to ask. You guessed it? Correct. Luo Yinglong nodded joyously. Yes, what movie did you find it in? Xian was expressionless, giving a nod of his head as he asked. Narnia. Cough, I can't say any more. Luo Yinglong was immediately panicked, before shaking his head decisively after a long while. Alright, next question. Was the legacy left behind by the saints or cultivators? Can't say. Did you obtain the complete legacy? When this question was asked, Luo Yinglong hesitated for a long while, frowning as he thought before murmuring, no. Although we entered a very deep layer, we were only able to obtain one ultimate legacy and several more minor items that weren't part of the legacy because of certain sudden circumstances. Although the ruins still remain, we can't enter anymore. That's all I can say. What was that ultimate legacy? Can't say. You want us to quickly kill Adam because of this ultimate legacy? Xian frowned slightly, asking again. Can't say. Did you all form the Angel Alliance before or after obtaining this legacy? Can't say. One more question. Have you entered Aragon before? Do you know about the announcement within that will cause certain things to happen if said? Xian thought for a while before asking. Aragon. We've never experienced that movie. An announcement that will cause something to happen if said? What's that referring to? Luo Yinglong asked curiously. Xian let out a breath, pushing up his spectacles. All are unspeakable secrets? Even if I press you for the details, you probably can't say anything. Although there are some questions subject to confirmation, I roughly understand what you're trying to get across. Luo Yinglong was immediately overjoyed. You understand? As expected of Team China's strategist, the weirdo Xian. Cough, take it that I didn't just say that. How about it? Since you understand, go and kill Adam with me. No. Xian said this word indifferently, before keeping his mouth shut, only silently flying forward. Why? Luo Yinglong was stunned for a very long time, before being unable to restrain his anger and flying to before Xian and shouting angrily. Because we are Team China. Xian gave Luo Yinglong a cold look, before saying calmly, from the start of this battle, no, since Adam mingled with the majority of teams to form the Angel Alliance, the main character position of the final battle no longer had anything to do with him or the Angel Alliance. This is a battle between Team Devil and Team China. I have my own schemes and calculations. It doesn't matter what legacy Adam obtained, because I wasn't going to let him off from the start anyways. The only end to disrupting our battle with Team Devil will be extermination. When these words were said, it wasn't just Luo Yinglong who was stunned. The rest of Team China was as well. Zheng said dumbly to Xian, my god, did you unknowingly overcome your heart's devil? You sounded so pleasant just now. Xian laughed coldly at him. You should have been the one saying this. This is the conviction behind you battling to this day, right? My schemes since the start of the final battle have relied on this. It's all to let Team China rise to the top of the realm and get that title of the apex. I think you know what it means for a kind versus king and soldier against soldier battle. Perhaps at the end of this final battle, we may be wiped out from this realm. Even if we do win, I'm afraid only you and a few others will be left. So, you should have been the one saying this. Zheng gave Xian a deep look. He carefully thought through the arrangements and things Xian had done along the way. Although he didn't know how Xian's scheme was going, he knew this man's resolve. It was like that first time he met this man. For the sake of the group's survival and benefit, he could dispassionately view all life. I've always imprinted it deep on myself. From Resident Evil Apocalypse, the first time our team was wiped, when my clone angrily decapitated me and all my friends died, this has always been the reason I fought. After this final battle, Team China will be the strongest. This is my promise to you. Whether you're dead or alive then, this promise shall always be my conviction. Zheng sighed. He gave Luo Yinglong a look, before straight ahead. Let's go, towards the clue of the 7th Underground Laboratory and Team Celestial. I trust Xian. Since he said he's made the arrangements, then he's made them. I have only one job, to fight my clone. Luo Yinglong, I don't know why you wanted to look for us Team China to help, but since you said you wanted to join us if Team China still has a future, then the first thing you have to remember before joining us is that you have to trust your comrades. Let's go. We shouldn't make Team Devil wait too long. Alright. You'll trust that weirdo Xian this one time. I hope your trust this time doesn't backfire on you. It's just dying once anyway. Speaking of which, didn't your squad have some pretty assassin girl with a big chest? She was in my divinations before. Did she lose us? Luo Yinglong let out a breath as well, and he could only helplessly agree to Zheng. However, he still looked around, and asked curiously in the end. Apart from the wish of living on itself, another reason we want to live on is because we each have our own battles to face. This is fate, and our personal decisions. She's off to face her own battle. Zheng gave Luo Yinglong a look, muttering, that's the second thing to remember if you want to join Team China. At the same time, there were great changes in Team Devil's base. All the members got up onto their sky sticks. Coincidentally, Team China and Team Devil possessed individual flying equipment that were practically the same. From certain aspects, the two teams were too similar. 1 hour 37 minutes until Team China's missile hits. 1 hour 52 minutes until Team Celestial's plan completes. Although the initial situation is slightly messed up now, we still have an absolute initiative. Follow my orders to split into 2 squads. The first will go to Team Celestial's base. When the situation there changes, follow my instructions to start dealing a blow to the Angel Alliance members. The second squad will follow me. Well, go to the entrance to the Hive first and sneak attack Team China there. Team China had split into squads before entering Raccoon City. One of the squads was the main combat force for the final battle despite being only 6 in number, comprising of Zheng and Xian, who were top tier in the realm. The squad strength was incredible, enough to forcibly go against Team Devil. Of course, being able to go against them didn't guarantee victory. These were 2 separate matters. The other squad were more in number, and although they couldn't quite match up to the first squad, they still had experts of various fields. They also had Team China's number 2 strategist Xiao Honglu. It was a team existing specially for ambushes. As long as a suitable opportunity arose, they could suddenly charge out to give a ferocious bite, and it would be one that cut to the bone. They only needed to occupy a single missile base based on Xian's initial request. Occupying all wasn't necessary, as while Xian had given them a lot of the super virus, its volume wasn't too much. Several warheads would be enough to disseminate the virus throughout the city. Using such a team and a strategist did seem to be overkill, but there was no other choice. Only Honglu could familiarly operate various kinds of modern weaponry and fire missiles apart from Xian in Team China. And to avoid the squad from being too weak and making clone Xian not fix his sights on Zheng and the rest, this team had become this current situation. They were powerful in certain extremes and could launch sudden attacks, but they were unable to pose a fatal threat to Team Devil and the Angel Alliance. What an awkward position. We can't possibly be spending this final battle as deliverymen, right? Honglu muttered as he sulked. They were at a missile base's missile firing platform. Honglu had in the long time since entering the realm, enjoyed reading books of all sorts in his spare time. This was indeed lived up to his reputation as a genius, or someone with a highly developed central nervous system. Although he wasn't quite at Xian's level, he would still be a pinnacle strategist in other teams. When Honglu said this and everyone all spontaneously looked at him, the little boy's face reddened and he said hurriedly, fine fine. No need to look at me like that, I was just grousing a little. Relax, you'll be carefully considering the intent behind Xian's scheme. I won't say anything more about not understanding. Frankly speaking, the act of splitting up hadn't been one Honglu approved of. But in that situation where they lacked any usable intel or clues, he couldn't not agree, as he wasn't able to come up with another actionable plan. He couldn't match up to the greatest strategist Xian under the circumstances of having equal intel and clues. So, he could only helplessly agree to split up. But is Xian splitting up this time purely, as he said, just to disseminate the virus and affect Team Devil's line of vision? Honglu couldn't understand Xian's scheme and calculations. What was deep in the recesses of that man's mind couldn't be guessed by anybody except he himself. Hence, after plucking many hairs and under the repeated questioning of the other squad members, Honglu finally snapped that he didn't know, revealing the true disposition of his age group, a childish tantrum. Honglu only finally meekly apologized to the rest when he entered the missile base and began to operate the platform's controls. After all, the squad's mission wasn't one that would let him throw a child's tantrum. He had to guess Xian's intent, just like in Independence Day, and lay the scheme for the final battle in concert with him. But I really don't get what Xian is thinking. Is this squad really just to confuse Team Devil's line of sight? That doesn't make sense. After all, the foundation of our hypothesis is that we think Team Devil has some sort of omniscience. That's how they can know we split into squads. But if they do have some kind of omniscience, there's no way clone Xian will be confused by such a small trick. They're Xian's after all, and they have both stand at the highest level of intelligence. Honglu pulled his hair off in vexation. He looked at a missile soar into the sky towards Raccoon City. His heart was instead becoming less and less confident at what was going on as he repeatedly guessed at Xian's thoughts. Honglu inhaled a deep breath. He suddenly asked Lan, who was beside him, Big Sis Lan, let me ask you something. Let's say there was a pair of eyes that could constantly monitor you at every moment and know every action of yours. It can also watch someone else, but the pair of eyes can only keep track of what he's doing when it's watching him and won't know what's happening during the times it's not watching. Let me ask, how would you pass a message you don't want the eyes to know to the other person? This analogy sounded incredibly like Team China's current situation of one strong squad and one weak squad. As expected, Lan was lost in thought. The pretty girl's forehead seemed to protrude slightly more than an ordinary person's, which gave her a sort of unique charm of the gentle and quiet sort. After thinking it through carefully, she said, "This eye can know everything about me? Does this mean for the moment it starts watching me, or does it mean it can know everything about me from birth to death with just one look?" Honglu froze upon hearing this. He frowned. If it knows everything past and future, that's undoubtedly the domain of a god. Team Devil shouldn't have reached this level yet, or else they'll have long since completely crushed Team Celestial and us. I think this omniscience you should think of it as a psyche force scan with no limitations of distance or plane. If so, when did these eyes start watching me? If he's watching me, I just need to find a moment before that and use an encoded method to pass on a message to the other person. As for whether he can understand or not, that's up to the other person's intelligence. Lan said after considering it. If so. Honglu suddenly said loudly to Zero. Zero, check all the virus containers Xian gave us carefully. Check if there's a message he left us without leaking the virus out. Not long after, everyone indeed found a piece of paper Xian left inside. There were only some strange numbers inside, seemingly without any sense to them. Honglu couldn't comprehend them whether he used Morse code or any other. In truth, these numbers seemed meaningless, written randomly without any thought put into it. What does X mean? This is the sole letter on the paper, with the rest being a meaningless stream of numbers. Damn it, don't tell me I'm supposed to guess it. I really want to see how Team Devil's Xian tries to guess it. Honglu turned the paper from side to side. He even wet a small bit of the paper, but the truth told him it was just a piece of ordinary paper that couldn't be any more ordinary. This meant the letter and numbers on it were hiding some secret. But without any rules being informed, how could anyone easily figure out the irregular numbers someone else randomly scribbled? This wasn't a novel's plot after all. X. X. Damn, X what? X-Files. That's not impossible. Team Devil's location. When Team Devil split into two squads, Clone Xian had already made Zhang Xiaoxiu activate the God Seal board, or rather, use the remaining causality points to activate it. As long as there were any changes that affected the battlefield, the God Seal board would have a notification for it, then monitor the location of that team for up to 48 hours. This was at great cost to Team Devil. They would have to endure even more severe space-time reversal and have to expend almost all of their causality points. It could be said it was an all-or-nothing choice for them. The God Seal board was akin to opium. Not using it was an incredible pity, and it was like it seduced the soul. After all, it represented the pinnacle of ancient rune technology. It was the strongest philosophical weapon, also known as causality-type weapons. This was the strongest and ultimate weapon of the Yellow Race's saints and cultivators. It was a completely different path of science from the Western White Race's saints and cultivators that emphasized the genetic constraint, biological science, and natural science. Team China obtained the Yellow Race cultivator's legacy. From the treasures as well as the equipment created by my original that the God Seal board listed, they should have cultivation techniques, and a complete set at that. Clone Xian looked at everyone. Know what this means? If it's just cultivation technologies, we already obtained them once in Xiu Mountain. You also already trained it to the nascent soul stage, right? Clone Xian pointed at a middle-aged Chinese man. His get-up was strange. He was wearing spectacles, but his clothes were a set of ancient Chinese robes, and he carried a sharp sword on his back. It was unconventional no matter how you looked at it. But your strength isn't even a tenth of Luo Yinglong. That's a fact. It's not that your cultivation level is too much worse than his, but that you don't have any other means to attack other than a flying sword. You only have a better body than ordinary people and a few methods to use refined qi. But that isn't much better than other enhancements like the vampire's blood energy, practicing qi, or demonic energy based on us. That cultivation that's been praised to the high heavens doesn't seem like much. It's just a slightly stronger technique. But is that the whole truth? Clone Xian looked at the God Seal board, saying, in truth, the cultivation Luo Yinglong has displayed is tremendously powerful. My original is precisely researching this might. Perhaps if given a few years, the Team China we face may all have power equal, or even more than Luo Yinglong. This is true cultivation techniques. It's not just a trick to strengthening yourself, but a science that's as careful and strict as natural science. When he said this, Clone Xian looked up to everyone. Based on the message the Yellow Race's saints told us, this God Seal board is the ultimate causality-type weapon created jointly by the Yellow Race saints and cultivators. In other words, apart from the saints' profound understanding and manipulation of energy, it won't be lacking in the cultivators' rune technology either. Perhaps the saints have similar technology as well. Anyways, the God Seal board is only around due to the amalgamation of these two great accomplishments. I think for those present who've read my country's ancient novel Investiture of the Gods, you shouldn't be unfamiliar with the equipment in that legend, right? Correct. In the legend, as long as you wrote a person's name on it, that person would die, and in a completely logical way, as if he deserved to die. This is causality. First, decide that hell die, then decide how hell die. In truth, this God Seal board's abilities don't just stop here. Based on the information we obtained in the ruins, it's capable of omniscience and omnipotence. It'll be like that person in Team China said. We'll know everything about her with one look. Also, if it was designed to be a weapon, it shouldn't be like how we are now. It shouldn't injure everyone at the same time as injuring the enemy. That's not a weapon, but a technique or ability. Thus, I completely believe the ruins when it said the weapon isn't complete. Xian suddenly extended his palms towards everyone, and he pressed down on a finger as he spoke. Then let's guess what happened then. Saints and cultivators were enemies before. They started a war that spread throughout the whole world, a grand primordial war. It even caused the heavens and earth to shatter. This event directly led to the collapse and decline of the glorious ancient civilizations. Although the two groups gradually grew again later and various technologies even improved under the catalysis of war, the numbers of humanity never rose. So, multiple fifth-stage lifeforms and cultivator lifeforms came into being. At the same time, they sensed the truth of the box as well as certain methods to break out. They then created God and left the pinnacle creations of their technologies they were proudest of in ruins. This brought forth the existence of several large ruins, such as the one Adam obtained his item from and the one we did too. That's the first thing. Secondly, based on the process from when we were obtaining the item in the ruins till the time the ruins suddenly collapsed, the three forces weren't harmonious, or may have even had grudges. At the same time, saints and cultivators were always on guard towards the other. They were afraid of the other side being too strong to the point they couldn't be stopped. That's why the white race's plan never finished and the God Seal board we obtained isn't complete. In other words, the two groups which created this weapon were afraid of the other having complete control over the weapon. Most likely, no, the God Seal board was split into two pieces. Each taking charging of half would be reasonable. If my guess is right, my original has the other portion. There's a 70% probability that it's that jade disk of creation, based on the name, creation, which is another form of causality. Although, I don't know the item's effects. The complete cultivation techniques, or rune technology, should also have the method to combining these two pieces together. Want to live on? Clone Xian smiled coldly at all those present. He even signaled a Psyche Force user to contact the other squad and completely transmit his words to all of the members of Team Devil. Then kill Team China. Obtain the relic item in their possession. We're dead otherwise. We all know space-time reversal can be cancelled by moving ourselves across space-time. The space-time reversal I cause here in this world won't follow me back to God's dimension, and it won't accumulate either due to me using causality points in another world. But have you thought about it? How much causality points have we used in this world? How many days is left till the end of this final battle? For the remaining 80 or 90 days, there's only one possibility that awaits us as time accumulates. A death that only targets us. Team Devil will come, and it'll be one that get more and more intense. Xian watched those around him gradually pale, and he leveled a cold gaze at them. I know some among you are rather despicable. You plan to go to the winning team after victory is decided? Or perhaps, you plan to betray us from the start? It no longer matters. The situation has already become fixed. It's not just Team China that can gain the greatest team unity possible by fighting with their backs against the wall. So can we. Want to live on? Then struggle well. Everyone looked at each other with complicated gazes. After a long time, Zhang Xiaoxiu asked carefully, Xian, what does that piece of paper mean? The God Seal board can only show the text, but not translate it? It is incomplete after all. It can't know what we don't understand ourselves. I said before it might be the X-Files. That may be one of the interpretations of X, but it's impossible to confirm. That's what I was talking about before. The me in Team China will make the same decision as me. If I was in his position, there's only one decision I would make. We would cut off all our own means of retreat to commit ourselves irrevocably and fight with our backs against the wall. What kind of prompt is this? It wouldn't really be the X-Files, right? Hunglu was still sitting there lost in thought. There were many strands of hair beneath his feet, all subconsciously plucked off in the midst of thinking. In just this short while, the originally dense hair had become much more sparse. However, the little boy's understanding didn't seem to rise and he continued to pluck off hair as before. X-Files. A mathematical function? Or something else? Damn it, Xian, you idiot. Next time, I'll write a string of code for you to guess and we'll see who becomes the idiot. Hunglu shouted. His voice still carried a tinge of childishness. He sounded like a cat that had had its tail stepped on a few times, and quite a few times at that. The little boy was already being brought near to the stage where he wanted to kill someone, and even his eyes were getting bloodshot. In the end, he had no choice, and tried to silently recite all the words that started with the letter X. Think, Xiang, thanks, Xie, some, Xie, star, seeing. Star. Starship Troopers. This dumb method of Hunglu actually gave a viable method. He cross-referenced every possible word against the movies Team China had experienced to see if he could find the origin of this X. Although he took a long time, and expended a lot of mental energy, he finally had a ray of hope. When he recited the word star, seeing, he suddenly recalled the word Starship Troopers. He hadn't revived yet when Team China went through this movie, and this movie had been the first time Team China had gone through a three-way team battle. Xian had also used a scheme to perfectly reverse the situation. As a little boy who had wanted to surpass Xian, he wouldn't give up on the chance to familiarize himself with the movie. Not long after he had revived, he had pestered the rest of the team to describe what happened in the movie in depth. Although he had been impressed with Xian's scheme deep inside, he had been stubborn and kept acting as if he wasn't very convinced by it. For that movie's scheme, Honglu had thought through it several times. He knew he wouldn't have been able to accomplish it so perfectly. Perhaps victory would have been secured under his own schemes, it would be a risky victory. It would likely have been a Pyrrhic victory and there would definitely be deaths. After all, the other side also had a good strategist. In this respect he truly was of mortal's wisdom. God damn it, those with mortal's wisdom can crack this code too. Honglu shouted. His finger was pointed at his head, as he recited incantations. A streak of coldness struck his head, followed by a ball of water. When the ball of water fell, it was already mixed with the ice, and immediately drenched the boy. If X represents the star, seeing, in Starship Troopers, does Xian want me to emulate his scheme in that movie? No. This final battle lacks any external forces to use. These numbers won't fit either, unless... I know. So it turns out this was the way to break the code. Honglu was sitting there in silent contemplation. He kept playing with his hair or sighing, then looking into the distance listlessly. It was as if he had aged decades, but this little boy was obviously still over 10 years old and was at odds with this aged and weighty gaze. Honglu was himself forced to do this. He really wanted to start cursing about how he was forced. The code on Xian's paper was indeed cracked, and the content was in fact correct. Not only were logical sentences formed, but they also constituted the scheme Xian wanted to hand over to them. But this scheme completely stunned Honglu. Not discussing Xian's scheme for now, there was firstly, the translation of the code for Xian's arrangements. It pointed at a movie Team China had experienced, which was indeed Starship Troopers. This wasn't the main issue of the code. The code was left behind as Xian wanted to conceal it from Team Devil's Xian. It was indeed hidden. As long as that omniscience wasn't perfect and couldn't know someone's past or future, then this way of hiding it would be very great. The numbers could only be completely understood by those of Team China who had experienced the movie or those who had listened to them describe in detail. This was the scheme Xian had laid down before, or more accurately, the writing script Xian had told them in advance as preparations to set up the scheme. In Starship Troopers, Team China had been saved and brought into space after a bloody battle, and a battle of wits had followed with Team Africa. Xian's scheme had utterly defeated this team with a strategist. While entering space from Klendathu, Xian had secretly told the teams the script to keep in contact with the team if they got captured. As long he set out these numbers and compared it to that script, then a sentence could be pieced together word by word. The paper's numbers were to be dealt with like such. It does indeed constitute a scheme and the scheme does have Xian written all over it. But do we really have to do this? Honglu plucked off a hair in vexation. He scrutinized the hair dumbly, internally thinking about what Xian wanted. The words Xian had given weren't complex. It only said Zero's modified gun had another method of usage, which could display shocking power when paired with his mystic eyes. But, upon using it, Zero would likely die, especially after displaying his power. Whether or not to use it was up to Honglu's discretion. The second thing was to get Honglu to think of a way to eliminate Team Celestial and Team Devil's squad. With these overwhelming odds, Team China was in a tough position. To obtain the objective of king versus king and soldier against soldier, it would be very difficult based on Team China's current situation. This was unless Honglu completed the goals Xian gave him at a small cost. Was this why you started training me starting from a few movies ago? Honglu looked at the ceiling listlessly. He could imagine Xian's arrangements in his mind. This whole final battle was a gamble on the victor of the king against king battle, and whether Zheng could win. The words also simply described some information Xian deduced. The most important was that Team Devil would send a squad out to stand guard near Team Celestial. As soon as Team China members appeared and began to assault Team Celestial, they would act as bystanders waiting to reap benefits. What Honglu had to do was completely eliminate the two other sides with the information and power he had on hand. How can it be done? Even if we can use the special effect of Zero's modified gun, would they not know how to run? Zero's life will be how do I get them to openly fight each other too, or gather together? This difficulty isn't any more easy than guessing your code. Damn, I never thought you thought so highly of me, Xian. You actually entrusted such an important duty to me. Honglu didn't know that most of Team China could all guess that Team China didn't possess the advantage amongst the three factions. Especially the victory against Team Devil, where they would gamble on the soldiers that would win. They hoped Team China would win, and were betting on all their luck and schemes. For example, would their second strategist be able to truly display what a strategist needed to do, in the sole advantage Team China had over Team Devil and Team Celestial, the field of strategists? In other words, their schemes and victory would likely affect the conclusion of this final battle. But how do I reach this goal? Honglu asked himself, and everyone looked at him speechlessly. The missile Team China fired soared towards Raccoon City. The 4 missiles fired all exploded in the north, south, east and west sectors of the city. The virus carried by the missiles wouldn't be killed by the heat and shock waves of this level. Instead, the genes of the virus rapidly altered and even absorbed a portion of the heat. They speedily multiplied and the virus propagated in all directions through the air and explosion shock waves. The first to be hit were some zombies and zombie dogs. Creepers were infected too. The virus with 4th stage genes was terrifying. They altered their genes in the moment they took over these life forms. A missile? In a certain area within Raccoon City, a team was fighting with two large creepers. The battle was very strange. There was a group of people fighting with one creeper, while a coquettish woman was using a leather whip to strike repeatedly at the other creeper. Not mentioning her figure or appearance for now, just her using a flaming whip to hit the creeper while giggling made everyone sweat. This was purely a woman who could apply S&M to the level of combat. The coquettish beauty was currently giggling as she struck the creeper. Her attacks carried a flame attribute to it, and every strike carried incredible force with it. It would send the giant creeper flying off into the distance, and the flames kept scorching it. She was obviously just playing around, and it seemed she could actually immediately end the battle if there was a need. Based on this strength, she couldn't be any weaker than the third stage. While battling, she had looked up and saw a missile streaking past through the sky at a speed visible to the eyes and falling towards the distance. For a time she had been stunned, and she muttered out those words. She had nearly been knocked down by the creeper, and in her anger she used force to lash out with the whip to turn the creeper's head into a paste. It was only then that she stared into the distance. A psyche force scan perfectly captured the scene of the missile falling in everyone's mind. The missile's explosion hadn't been scary and had only been equivalent to an anti-tank missile. It was simply so weak that everyone was astonished. Who would be so bored to fire a missile with such low destructive power? There was nothing there anyways. Even if a team was there, that destructive power may have been able to kill ordinary people, but it wasn't too likely to kill a member of a team. Wait. Why are those zombies not moving? A black man behind the woman asked curiously. However, no one answered his question. They were all directing their attention there, trying to see if the zombies had just been scared silly. What other reason would they not move? Just as they looked in confusion, the zombies within their vision exploded. Chunks of blood and gore splattered in all directions. However, every drop of blood and every chunk of gore was connected by a strand of blood. They actually began to wriggle in midair and transform, as if they all possessed a life of their own. The larger chunks of gore actually grew eyes and mouths. One is to see, one is to eat. When these basic organs had grown, the blood and gore that filled the air began to mutually devour each other, until the final zombie had become a giant piece of meat. Its shape wasn't fixed and each zombie was metamorphosing into something different. Some grew 4 new limbs, some grew countless teeth, some grew horns and some grew wings that were covered in sharp teeth. The members of the team were all dumbfounded. Everyone watched dumbly. No one knew why these zombies were mutating, and into such a horrifying and ugly form at that. This no longer looked like the zombies and monsters of Resident Evil, but an image straight out of hell. The woman's reaction was the quickest. Everyone, let's run. Those monsters are strong. I can already feel their pressure from this far. That missile isn't simple. It must have released some virus. If we don't run, not only will those monsters mutate, but we'll die too. And it'll be from becoming those disgusting monsters. I don't want that. The woman shouted, and turned tail towards the opposite direction. The people behind her were all stunned, before following their leader, hot on her heels. Everyone all drew out their strength. There were a few who were weaker and didn't seem to have been strengthened much, and were thus running slower. They were rookies of the realm, and it was already not bad of their mental fortitude to be able to run after seeing that horrifying scene. Regretfully they were destined to die. Because of the rainstorm, water filled Raccoon City and rain fell. The virus could not only spread through the air, but it was much faster when through liquids. What was more ridiculous was the ability to adjust their genes. These genes were 80% similar to that man wearing a golden mask Team China had once met. This sort of cultivation technology combined with the T-virus wasn't anything inferior to the golden mask monster. The virus didn't just propagate. They continuously altered their genes and absorbed the microscopic life within the rainwater and accumulated water, using the minute energy and matter within to multiply themselves. Although they didn't find a host body and undergo a sudden change, the virus was multiplying exponentially in number and spreading through the rain and accumulated water. The already mutated monsters began to massacre one another. The energy and matter within their bodies attracted the instincts of the other viruses. Every virus host wished to devour all other hosts to strengthen themselves. With this infinite battle and devouring a higher tier life form of these monsters would eventually be born. As the virus spread through the city, apart from the Angel Alliance and Team Devil's squad, the rest of the teams in the city were all heading towards the Umbrella Corporation building. The building's location wasn't a secret and was marked on all the maps in the city. As the Umbrella Corporation was one of the very largest companies in the world, practically everyone in the world had heard of it. Finding this landmark-like construction wasn't of difficulty. At one of the locations a missile exploded not far from the building. Based on the insane rate of multiplication and corruption of the virus, it wouldn't take more than 2 hours to reach the building. Of course, this was just for the virus. How about if the infected monsters made their way in this direction? Not only were they strong, but they were virus carriers as well. Damn. What kind of monster is this? Resident Evil Extinction didn't have anything like this. A black man roared. He swung a giant totem pole in his hand, and it struck the monster in the head. With a bang, the 3-headed monster with only an eye and mouth on its head was smashed into the ground. It sunk half a meter into the ground. Of course, to this monster over 2.5 meters in height, it just needed but a step to get out. However, the totem pole carried enormous force, and one of its heads directly blew apart. This was a team near the Umbrella Corporation's building. They consisted of mostly blacks. It seemed that the geographical locale they were from was most likely Africa. The black man in the lead had muscles that had all swelled up, and had reached a height of 2.3 or 2.4 m. Compared to the strange monster, apart from lacking horizontally, his stature was almost the same. With a giant metal totem pole in his hand, even a tap or brush would break bones or cause internal injuries, let alone an actual strike. This must be a plot change. It's not like we've only experienced this sort of thing a few times. Were these powerful monsters really those weak zombies? The rest of the team were behind the black man. A black woman behind him asked in astonishment and fear. Many arrows were embedded in the monster's body, and it was obvious how many arrows she had shot at it. However, every arrow had come to a halt as soon as it entered its body. It was forcibly blocked by those powerful muscles, and the monster's body seemed to have some corrosive properties. The arrow's tip slowly vanished. When the final arrow fell off, the wounds on the monster's body began to wriggle and shut. It looked completely unharmed in the slightest. The monster's strength had surpassed their imaginations. It was much stronger than those creepers, mutated or otherwise. Several members of the team used guns with greater firepower to spray out bullets, and a mixed blood used a high-power laser to initiate attacks. All this did was blow off some pieces of the monster. The chunks began to wriggle and transform in mid-air, growing out many fine tentacles. The chunks would crawl along on the ground and merge back into the main body. After such a long fight, the monster had not only not been exterminated, but it had also changed continuously, becoming stronger and stronger. Go. We won't tangle with this monster any longer. This is surely a plot change of Resident Evil Extinction. It'll be hard for our team to handle this monster with our strength. Well, bring it to the Umbrella Corporation's building and let the other teams work with us to bring this monster down. The black man made a prompt decision. He immediately withdrew his totem pole and leapt backwards. As he shouted for his team members to flee together, for some reason, an ill premonition rose in his heart. It was as if he was in a situation of great danger. Who knew what other changes this monster would have that it would tingle his sixth sense, such it was as if a knife was pressed into his back, making goosebumps rise all over his body. Too late. A member behind him suddenly began to rave madly, continuously using his hands to tear at his flesh. Some blood vessels were actually torn open, but the blood that spurted out didn't mix into the rainwater. Instead, it was like a thick silk-like paste, every drop of blood connected by a strand of blood. The man began to howl, tearing and digging out his flesh and internal organs, as if only that could free him from his pain. This terrifying scene made everyone involuntarily step away. Everyone looked on at him destroying himself with horror. Not one person dared step forward. The person's tearing had reached deep inside, and with a scream, he ripped out his own heart. That was when they all saw it clearly. His heart had grown teeth and was chewing and gnawing on flesh and blood from some unknown place. With a bite, it tore off half his hand. The man could no longer scream. As he fell, all he could do was let his heart continue to chew and swallow his hand and arm. Not only that, but this sort of grotesque change began to follow on the rest of his body as well. As the first person began to retch, the rest soon were as well as they ran. Their minds were a blank. All they desired was to escape from this horrifying place. After all, that man's fate had been too terrifying to them. Even suicide or getting eaten by zombies would be better some. Any sort of death would be a mercy compared to becoming a monster. All they could do was run as hard as they could. A few managed to guess that regarding mutated monsters' corruption, who knew when he had infected a virus. Perhaps, they too. All of a sudden, one of the fleeing people began to scream madly as well. However, he didn't begin to tear at his flesh like the other person. He raised his gun and pointed at his head instead, pulling the trigger. His willpower was quite resolute. He had destroyed his own brain before he could experience that horrifying way of dying. Then, his flesh began to melt like a candle, with even his bones and intestines doing so. He turned into a pile of rotten meat within seconds. Air bubbles seethed and churned through that pile of rotten meat. Then, it began to stand up from the ground. Everyone couldn't avoid throwing up. They began to race madly towards the Umbrella Corporation's building, as if they could be safe as long as they got there. Then, another one of their number began to screech madly as well. This team was the first to encounter the virus. Based on their level of the unlocked genetic constraint, the first to mutate were those who hadn't unlocked the constraint, followed by those who had a lower level. As long as they were infected by it, the only difference was how long it took to mutate, unless they managed to spontaneously unlock the fourth stage and eradicate the virus through alteration of their genes. Not one other person could possibly escape. What the hell is that? In the air far from this team, Team Africa's faces had all lost color. Even Neos was trembling all over. This sort of scene of humans mutating was too terrifying, exceeding even the limits of their imagination. In truth, they were of God's realm. What was God's realm? That was experiencing countless movie worlds. But even the most terrifying horror movie would be pleasing to the eye compared to these human mutations. It was in completely different dimensions, just like the difference between a romance movie and a horror movie. Quickly find Team China. We no longer have a path of retreat left. Neos inhaled a deep breath, and looked at that Umbrella Corporation's building that was faintly visible in the distance. Their goal was already so close, of course, that place may also be the place their life came to an end. Unlike the teams which had discovered abnormalities, Team China didn't continue to fly towards the Umbrella Corporation's building. Without a Psyche Force user by their side, Not being discovered by other teams was good enough, let alone discovering abnormalities. In fact, they were actually still very far from the building. The closer they were, the higher the chances of running into a team. In the short term, they still hadn't been discovered by any team yet. I really have nothing but respect for you all. You actually didn't bring a Psyche Force user into the city? Isn't this just seeking death? And you want to challenge Team Devil with so few people? Mad respect. Luo Yinglong had been showing his personality of a hothead on the way here. He had constantly jibber-jabbered on, especially when he heard Team China plan to challenge Team Devil. While this was within his expectations, he couldn't help but have misgivings. Why are you so chatty? Were you chased out from Team Celestial by Adam because you talk too much? What a joke. Luo Yinglong said loudly. Look, a powerful cultivator like me would rank as one of the very best combatants whichever team I join. I was incredibly popular in Team Celestial, you know? If Adam didn't want to cough, cough. Anyways, for an eminently brilliant, dashing, and practically peerless cultivator like me to join your Team China, it's basically a super duper fortune for you. Ha ha ha. Everyone rolled their heads, ignoring this hothead. However, Xian suddenly asked, you want to join Team China? How will you? Haha, don't know. You all mustn't have experienced this movie. Luo Yinglong revealed an expression that he was bursting to tell them. There's a side quest in the horror movie Constantine. If you let the male main character really die in the climax and fulfill Lucifer's wish, hell give you some infernal contracts. According to the original plot, they can let souls ascend to heaven from hell. The effect if we obtain it is to let someone transfer to another team unconditionally. It just needs an agreement from the other team's members and the contract owner. I've already signed on it. As long as Zheng Jia signs it, he'll be a member of Team China when this movie ends. Ha ha ha. Constantine. Everyone had watched this movie, which should be termed a fantasy movie rather a horror movie. The movie spoke of a modern world with Lucifer and God. The main character was a psychic who had failed an attempt at suicide. As suicide violated the tenets of Christianity, he was barred from entering heaven after death and was consigned to eternal damnation in hell. He continuously helped the church to regain the right to enter heaven. In an adventure, he had shattered the conspiracy of the son of Lucifer and sacrificed himself for the sake of the female main character, thus earning the right to enter heaven. However, Lucifer revived him for the sake of obtaining his soul. This was the movie's plot. If the plot was changed so that Lucifer could obtain his soul, perhaps there really would be some side quest somewhere. Everyone was all sweating when they heard this. Of course, it couldn't be seen in this rainstorm. Luo Yinglong didn't notice their expressions. He only laughed as he talked on and on. However, he suddenly quietened down, and began to look around, as if something had appeared in the vicinity. What? Did some Psyche Force user notice us? Zheng had a strange expression as he asked curiously. No. Not a Psyche Force user. If we were scanned, we'll be able to naturally sense it at our level. Luo Yinglong shook his head without turning it, looking around. It's some other strange feeling, like I'm sensing some danger. Did that pilot guy from before drive me crazy? Forget it. Well, ignore it for now. Zheng, sign this. Luo Yinglong took out a lambskin parchment and threw it over to Zheng who was nearby. Zheng accepted the lambskin parchment. He opened it to see words he had never seen before. However, there was something wondrous about them. Just looking at them let him understand their meaning. It was as if the words were automatically inserted into his mind with meaning. It was the same as what Luo Yinglong said. The contractee would join the team at the end of the movie as long as the team's leader signed his name in blood, and Luo Yinglong would become a member of Team China. Sounds simple. How many of these do you all have? Zheng hesitated, before biting his finger and using the blood that flowed out to write his name. A bloody light flashed and the lambskin parchment absorbed the blood. Nothing seemed to happen, until a dozen seconds later when the lambskin parchment burnt up despite being in the rain. It turned completely to ash, as if the rainwater was ineffective. Luo Yinglong looked happy as he said, that's good. I'm a member of Team China now. Catch. Luo Yinglong tossed out an antique jade bottle to Zheng. Zheng caught it, and felt a cooling sensation in his hand. He heard Luo Yinglong say, this is a life-bound bottle that has my time of birth engraved on it. If my body dies, my nascent soul will enter it. Remember, don't let the bottle break after my nascent soul enters. Otherwise, he'll really die. I've already revived once. The requirements for the second revival are too harsh. Unless absolutely necessary, don't let me die. The second revival? Which movie? Can't say. Luo Yinglong gestured helplessly. The movie shouldn't be hard to guess. Just think about the movies you've watched. You should be able to guess the place. You also put some thought towards this eventuality. When you mentioned the second revival chance, did you already make the resolution to die in this final battle? I don't need you to tell me. Luo Yinglong retracted his hot-headed persona, instead seriously saying, this final battle is scarier than anything else. Not just the battle that will explode soon, but I also made the resolution to die when I left Team Celestial. If I hadn't been able to leave, he'll have killed Song Tian even at the cost of my life. Since it's the final battle, I've long since come to an understanding. I wouldn't have rebelled against Team Celestial either if Adam hadn't gone overboard. For some unknown reason, I've been having a bad premonition since before the final battle began. I feel like I'm going to die here. Who knows? I'll do all I can, but it's all up to fate. Cheng Xiao laughed. How about you give yourself a divination? Aren't you a cultivator? Divining should tell you quite a bit. Doctors can't self-treat. Luo Yinglong rolled his eyes at Cheng Xiao. This logic is simple. I can divine for others and some individual matters, or some of the future. But I can't divine for myself. At most I can divine fortune or misfortune. But I've already divined misfortune thrice already, so there's no point going on. After all, this final battle is surely misfortune. Could it be fortune in any case? True. They gradually approached the Umbrella Corporation's building as they discussed. The building looked very run down, with many floors even having traces of damage from explosions. However, it still looked like it had been preserved intact on a whole. It could be seen how much of a rush the building had been evacuated at that time, going from the door still being left half opened. What's that below? Zheng's eyes were sharp, and he pointed at a faraway street as he shouted. As he operated the sky stick towards there, everyone else didn't hesitate and followed after. The closer they got, the more on guard everyone got, as the scene below was one that reeked of blood and horror. They saw a black man screaming non-stop. He was swinging an enormous metal totem pole around. 3 strange monsters were around him and constantly launching attacks. One of them seemed to be nothing more than a ball of rotting meat, without any distinguishing features. Every time it attacked, the ball of rotten meat would rear up and transform into giant sharp teeth that snapped at him. It did look quite grotesque. Another monster was covered in tentacles. The tentacles of meat were a vortex of teeth, and it overall looked like a pillar of meat that had multiple tentacles hanging on it that were continuously lashing out at the black man. The remaining monster was even more horrifying. Undigested human parts remained on its body, including several limbs and 2 or 3 heads that bobbed up and down on it. The monster's shape was still vaguely human, but a giant mouth that was gaping open split open its stomach. The teeth were incredibly sharp, and those rows of teeth looked able to bite a cow in half, let alone a human. The virus had already been launched? Although Team China were all greatly shaken inside, they could all guess what had happened when they exchanged a look. Cheng Xiao especially had a deep impression. The monster before them was obviously an enlarged version of the mutated meat he had seen in Qian's lab. Honglu had obviously launched the virus. Who knew why it was so fast? What the fuck is that? Luo Yinglong's reaction was the biggest. He immediately shouted, and took out his sword. He planned make a hand seal and save the black man, but he was unexpectedly stopped by Zheng at his side. He can't be saved. If you pity him, use your sword to kill him. Why? Luo Yinglong was dumbfounded. His eyes flashed, and he asked Zheng, you all know what that monster is down there? No, what I should be asking is, you all created this monster? Qian didn't wait for Zheng to reply, as he said, correct. I created a virus, using the T-virus, Zheng, and cultivation technology, as well as some rune technology. It's basically reached the 4th stage and can alter its genes by itself and evolve. Stop. 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 Luo Yinglong rubbed his head. In one short sentence, it's powerful and scary, right? Please don't be like Adam and like to explain your theories and technologies in detail. I'm a hothead. I neither understand nor do I want to listen. From what you're saying, this virus is terrifying enough that you'll die if you contract it, right? Hand it over. Qian didn't say anything more, and took out a syringe from the dimensional bag. He threw it over to Luo Yinglong. He didn't act polite, and immediately kept it. He smiled, I've unlocked the initial 4th stage. I should be able to resist a little longer than that black man below, correct? This virus only acts on life forms below the 4th stage. When you break through to the 4th stage and above, you're immune to all viruses and toxins. You can optimize your genes and easily eliminate the viruses that enter your body. Even after the virus mutates, you can optimize your immunity. Then, why exactly did you throw a vaccine to me? Luo Yinglong scolded. He didn't say more, making a hand gesture and controlling his flying sword. An azure light flashed past, and the head of the fighting black man below had already fallen to the ground. In truth, slight mutations had already appeared on his body. However, he had been a true man and soldiered on through the pain to fight. He wanted to smash that monster into a bloody pulp. However, he hadn't been able to kill it, and had instead begun to slowly mutate. Before the head fell to the ground, multiple sturdy limbs extended from the face, as if it were some giant spider. Starting from the forehead, it split open through the center and formed a giant mouth. It began to chomp on its body, frantically eating and eating.